So it's gun season here today in Michigan, and it seems you can always tell once we get to about the third or fourth day of gun season that frustration must really be setting in for a lot of guys, because you start getting a lot of emails and phone calls from guys that are having a really frustrating time out in the woods. They're just not seeing the bucks that they did during bow season. For some guys, the bucks have already disappeared by October 1st. They're really not sure what to do, and they reach out, they just want some help and maybe get another set of eyes on their property to see what they can do to improve their hunting. So I just wanted to shoot this video for maybe that new landowner or guys who have had property for a while but have never really had great hunting, and guys that have never really done a lot of deer habitat. So this video is going to be catered to guys that have a bunch of family members that hunt a big property, or even big groups that hunt small properties, which surprisingly there's enough of those out there, where everybody goes out. And I mean, I just got a call the other day from a guy in Michigan where him and 4 buddies of his are hunting 25 acres. And between all 5 guys on opening day, they saw 2 deer. And so, you know, man, I just really feel bad for guys like that, because they're not familiar with what's possible in better deer hunting with better deer habitat. So this video is basically for those kind of groups where they just need that nudge to go ahead and open up that canopy in their woods and let the sunlight in so that they can get more food, more cover, reduce sight lines, and actually make their property a reason why deer want to stay on that property. So, you know, what I'm finding is the common denominator with guys that are really frustrated is that they have really wide open properties. They got a big wide open woods. You can see 300 yards. They got beautiful big trees, and these guys are just not willing to cut their trees, or they're afraid to cut the trees, or maybe the wife doesn't want to cut trees. But what I find a lot is that grandpa doesn't want to cut the trees, right? Because what I hear in stories is that grandpa shot a big buck back in, 2003, and he shot that thing at 250 yards with a 30-06, and they get a lot of miles out of that situation. And so they think it's gonna, possibly happen again. And, the older generation, let's face it, the older generation, the way the hunting culture was back in the day was that, hey, we wanted to sit up on a ridge, and we wanted to look down, and we wanted to be able to see 200-300 yards, because, seeing deer is fun, right? And so that's another reason why a lot of guys will set food plots in the gun season, because basically seeing deer is kind of like a form of entertainment. It's not always about killing a deer, right? It's about seeing deer, being out there, being at hunt camp, being out there with family and friends. I get it. And maybe this video isn't for those kind of guys. But what I wanted to do in this video is talk to the guys that maybe you're in a hunt club and you know that you got to cut your trees, but you got some members that maybe don't want to cut your trees for whatever reason. And, those are the guys that are not allowing anything to get done and to pull the cart in the right direction for better deer habitat. I had a gentleman call me up a couple days ago. Like I said, 5 guys hunting 25 acres. I saw 2 deer on opening day. Well, I started asking them some questions, and sure enough, they haven't cut any trees in at least 25 years. Actually, the landowner planted trees with his grandpa or his dad, and he can't get himself to cut those trees because they planted them. But now those trees are, they're huge, and you can see a country mile through those woods. And I get it, for whatever reason, everybody's got their reasons why they don't want to cut trees. And it's not up to me when I go visit a property and I explain to people that, man, we really got to get some sunlight into this woods, because there's nothing ever going to grow. It's never going to get thick, and deer are just going to pass through or, run through. So we got to give these deer a reason to be here. And the only way to do that is to take out the canopy. And, you know, that's not my decision to make, but I just give the information to landowners so they can decide. So I feel it's my job to let landowners understand why they got to cut their trees and why sunlight is your friend and why shade is your enemy when it comes to deer habitat. So, you know, when you have a shaded woods, there's thousands and thousands and millions of seeds that are in the seed bank in the ground, right? And they're just waiting to sprout, but they can't because they don't have any sunlight. They're just sitting there waiting for the sunlight. And once you remove that canopy and you have a logger come in and take out some of these big mature trees, what happens after that is incredible. Now, some properties are going to regrow faster than others. And a lot of times you don't know what's going to happen when you take out that canopy. You could get a lot of invasives, you could get more oaks, you could get a lot of maples, you could get a lot of resprouting of poplar, aspen, and, you know, creates a real thicket real quick. I'm out here on this property, and man, this property has not been cut in, I don't know how many years, probably 40 years. There is just so much open ground here and so many mature trees. I thought this would be a good place to kind of give an example of what I'm talking about. But, you know, you can see behind me here, it's just completely wide open. And these deer are literally running through. Once they start feeling that hunting pressure during the season, they're not spending any time in here, you know. And, you know, you look around and there's a ladder stand way over there. I mean, way out in the wide open, you know. And, you know, this is not to criticize anybody, but I'm just trying to explain really why you want to cut your trees. So let me explain the process of having your trees cut. And that would be to have somebody like my buddy Jake or myself, you know, have one of us guys come to your property and find out what your goals are. How many guys you got hunting? Are you bow hunters? Are you gun hunters? Do you do both? What style of hunting do you like? Are you early season hunters or late season hunters, muzzleloader hunters? You know, all that stuff is taken into consideration when creating a plan. So, you know, once you get all that figured out, and how much equipment do you have? Do you want to plant food plots, right? Do you want to plant annual food plots every year? Or do you just want to plant a perennial food plot and maybe mow it once or twice a year? A lot of it depends on how far away you live from the property and all that good stuff. So anyway, once you get a plan figured out and you have a drawing in hand, now you can call a forester. And I would never recommend calling a logger first, okay? Always got to call a forester and have him walk the property with you, because he's going to be your advocate when it comes to hiring a logger, finding somebody that's going to do a good job for you, going to keep the loggers on the straight and narrow so you don't get ripped off, right? Because there's a lot of good loggers out there, but there's a lot of shady ones too, right? So got to make sure we protect ourselves that way. So I go through a bunch of details that I tell landowners, you know, that you want to convey to the forester. For instance, you know, if you're all about deer habitat and you don't really care about having another timber sale or timber cut in another 20, 25 years, you just want deer habitat today, then you need to really tell that forester that, hey, I want deer habitat, so we need to lower our threshold on the size of trees that we take out of here. A lot of foresters, you know, are going with that 16-inch. You know, it's not a hard and fast rule, but that's about average. And it also depends on the tree species too, right? But one thing I find when talking to foresters is that a lot of foresters cannot get themselves to cut trees before they're at their prime monetary value. So, you know, instead of maybe going down to a 14-inch tree, they're going to stick with that 16-inch or 18-inch tree. And what happens is the logger doesn't end up cutting enough trees. So the canopy's not opened up enough, and we're not letting enough sunlight in, and then we don't get the generation that we want, and our deer hunting doesn't really improve because we don't have the cover and the woody browse that we really want. So, you know, you really have to talk to the forester and say, hey, you know, I'm not interested in having you come back in 15 years and doing another timber cut, right? I mean, I want to cut this thing hard, and this is by no means a clear cut. We're not talking about doing a clear cut. We want to do a select cut. I don't know what term you want to use, but a select cut is taking a certain caliper tree of certain species, you know, not taking all the oaks. We're not going to do that. But, you know, if you got big oaks that are too close together and they're competing with each other and banging against each other, you know, yeah, we got to remove some of those to release some of the other oaks that, you know, will probably increase their acorn production by 25% as a result. So ideally, you want to get that forester to be an advocate on your side to take out more canopy off your property than he probably normally does on other properties. And that can be a really hard nut to crack because a lot of foresters just can't get themselves to do that. All right, so now you got a forester on your side, and he's going to get paid a portion or a percentage of the timber value that's removed off your property. So it's in his best interest to get you the best price. So then what he's going to do is come back a second time, and he'll come out and mark all the trees that you want cut, okay? Based on species, the size, area. And these areas on where to cut is going to be basically also based on the habitat plan that you get, because there are certain areas of the property that we don't want trees taken out, especially around the perimeter where you have to access, right? So we don't want to cut all the way up to the property line if you're going to be accessing blinds and stands down that property line. We don't want you to be walking through a bedding area. So a lot of times I'll recommend to not cut along the property line, maybe leave a 25 to 30 yard buffer. Okay, so that woods is going to remain open. Deer will not be bedding there. You can put in a perimeter trail if you want, and it's a lot easier to get in your property that way, but also you're going to have big trees that are going to be left for tree stands around the perimeter of the property, and that way the edge where it goes from open canopy woods into the new regrowth area, that line is going to be 30 yards inside your property instead of right on your property line where it's going to benefit your neighbor, okay? We know how many neighbors like to put their stands right on the property line, right? I mean, the grass always is greener on the other side of the fence for some reason. So, you know, so there's areas on the property that we don't want the loggers to cut, and that's all going to be on the plan. So anyway, once the forester gets done marking all your trees, then he's going to take that list, that inventory of trees, and he's going to shop that around to different loggers in the area. And he'll probably know which loggers are looking for what type of species. So he'll shop that list around, and these loggers will bid on the job. And you guys can choose which logger you want. Sometimes it's not always necessarily the highest bid, but you know, the logger with the best reputation on, you know, not messing up your property and doing things the way you want it to be done. And then the forester is supposed to be your advocate. He's kind of going to keep those guys in line, right? He's going to show up when they're here cutting, and he's going to make sure that your wishes are handled. And I'd also recommend for the landowner to be there at the property when the loggers show up as well. Make sure those loggers know that, you know, you're really interested in having a good job done, and you're not just, you know, oh, well, leaving it to whatever they decide, right? So then if you guys decide on what logger you want, you know, the forester will probably write up a contract that those prices are good for 2 years or so. That's generally about the average. Now, if you're lucky and you got a high and dry property with sandy soil and not a lot of swamp, you know, the logger can get in there pretty much almost any time of the year. He doesn't have to wait for a swamp to freeze over in the winter or dry up in the summer, right? So, but, you know, on the downside of that, if you do have a swampy property and you've got some wet ground that's preventing somebody to get to the back of the property with equipment, yeah, they're going to have to wait till it dries up in July or August, or maybe freeze over in the wintertime. So also on that plan that you're going to get is you're going to have some areas in there where, you know, we're going to have some food plots placed on this property. Whether you have food plots already, that's great. If not, if you don't have enough food plots or they're too small, we need to add some more food to the property. That'll be on the plan. But you're not the one that's going to create the food plots, right? Because we got loggers coming to do a select cut, and you know what, while they're there, shoot, let's have them do a clear cut where we want these new food plots or food plots expanded. They got the equipment there already, and if they do a clear cut for you where maybe they're taking out timber that they don't want, you know, they may have to charge you a little bit, but that'll just come out of the timber revenue that you have coming from the trees that they take, right? So they get done, the canopy is gone, they got the logs out of there, and you think about it, you've got better deer habitat, you didn't have to start your chainsaw, you didn't have to do any other work, and you got much better deer hunting with a check in your pocket. I mean, what's not to like about that, right? It's a win-win-win situation. And, you know, now you got a property that is actually going to start regrowing a lot of food in the way of woody browse, a lot of cover, reduced sight lines. And now you're going to find that your cameras are going to start picking up way more deer during the season, and even during the gun season when, you know, the pressure starts mounting. So some guys ask me though, so shoot, it's going to get so thick, I'm not going to be able to see anything, right? I mean, it's going to be so thick I can't even see 10 yards through the brush and all that. Well, that's why we got food plots, right? That's why we're going to make you know, food plot corridors, and we're going to direct deer to where we want them to go with, you know, hinge cut barricades. And then the other thing that you know, is real advantageous about this is that now that the big trees are gone, we're really only left with the medium size and smaller trees. And so now we can actually do some hinge cutting, not be hindered by some of those big monsters. And we can put deer bedding right where we want it, right? And so now you're going to know where the deer are going to be bedding. So when you access your property, you're not going to be bumping deer accidentally, like maybe, you know, you do now. And so then that allows you to hunt your food plots maybe in the early season, and then you can back off the food plots and hunt some of those bedding areas and strategic locations, you know, during those rut phases. So, you know, you got the best of both worlds. You know, that's when things really start getting exciting. So, you know, is that going to happen the very first year after your trees are cut? You know, no way. You know, it might if you get lucky, but, you know, we got to wait for some of that regrowth to come up, right? And maybe you got to wait for somebody to come in and do some hinge cutting if that's what you want done as well. But what we find is, you know, and Jake will tell you this as well, I can't tell you how many emails and texts we get with pictures of landowners that have had their property either logged and or hinge cut, and, you know, they text us or email us 3 years later with pictures of them holding, you know, a big trophy buck, a lot of times the biggest buck they've ever shot on the property. And it's always with the story that, you know, he was chasing a doe into a hinge cut. There was a video I did about a landowner, John, in Maryland. I mean, it totally transformed his property. And I mean, in 1 year, he saw more bucks running around 7 hinge cut areas. I mean, the chasing was unbelievable. Whereas before it was just a completely wide open woods. And it was so awesome that he had me come back for 2 more years in a row. He's taken several bucks now that have basically been living in the hinge cuts, which he just did again this past year. And then you got, you know, another client by the name of Bill. I did a follow-up video on his property a few years ago, whereas back in 2017, we started, you know, doing some hinge cutting and creating bedding and taking out the canopy. And in 3 years, he shot his first 3-year-old buck, where before he was lucky to ever see even a 2.5-year-old, right? Well, now he's passing 2.5-year-olds and just shooting 3.5-year-olds. And his neighbors are wondering where all the deer are. You know, his neighbors are frustrated, and, you know, Bill's just kind of playing along. Yeah, you know, not seeing a lot of deer either. And EHD has hit us quite bad and all that good stuff. So yeah, no, all the deer are on Bill's property. But I'll just share one more example. Got a client named Joe out in Wisconsin. He had me out there last year in the spring to do some hinge cutting in this real small 7-acre woodlot. And man, you want to talk about some monster trees. I mean, there was some monster white oaks that I took down that I saw. And there was just so many of them that it was just ridiculous. We got to get some of these on the ground, you know. And we ended up hinge cutting a bunch of smaller trees as well. And just about a week ago, he sent me an email with a picture of him holding one of his target bucks. And he said that buck came right through that open woodlot, going right into the hinge cut. And when he entered the hinge cut, he gave him a grunt and came right to him, and Joe took him right there. So I say to Jake all the time, man, Jake, how many times does this have to happen before it's mathematically not a coincidence, you know? So I say all this just to give some of you landowners that are not familiar with what a select cut can do for you, or a hinge cutting project can do for you. If you've never seen it before, you know, I've got several other videos, and so does Jake on his channel. And, you know, I would recommend, you know, go subscribe to Jake's channel, and, you know, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. The next several videos I'm going to make are going to be about hinge cutting. And the other thing I really want to do this winter is I want to go back to a lot of properties where I've hinge cut maybe 3-4 years ago. And then I want to come back, this winter with a video camera and really film what it looks like now. So, I mean, you're literally going to be going from a woods like this, and I would show up and maybe hinge cut for 2 days, or show up at a property where it had already been logged, right? And really, to have your property logged first, to have it select cut first, and then do the hinge cutting is really the preferred way to go. You don't want to hinge cut and then have it logged, because the loggers are going to ruin all the hinge cuts. And it's going to be really tough to hinge cut because you got to be dealing with all that big timber, right? So get that big timber out of there, and then you can do the hinge cuts, and you can dial in where you want the bedding. You can dial in, deer barricades, steering barricades where you don't want them to go and where you want to force them through, say in a pinch point funnel or so. The one thing you don't want to have happen is to have all these blowdowns. We got all these trees that are starting to come down now. And this is because these trees are way past their prime, right? They've been taken down by the wind. The strong are surviving and the weak are all falling on the ground. So, once they're on the ground, every month that goes by, those trunks are losing value. So, they're going to come down one way or another. Either a saw is going to take them down, or they're going to get taken down by the wind. So if they get taken down by the wind, now you got a bunch of cleanup to do, and that's not a lot of fun at all. So this is when I hear comments from landowners that once they understand that they waited too long, they're just really disappointed. It's like, man, I should have cut these a long time ago, but they didn't know. And the other thing too is a lot of landowners, they just don't want to do the wrong thing. They don't want to cut trees in the wrong place, and they don't want to ruin their woods. And I get it, I get it, but that's basically what this video is for, to maybe give some of these landowners the confidence to move forward, that you're not going to ruin your hunting. If you don't do anything, then your hunting is going to be just as poor next year as it was this year. Nothing's going to change, and matter of fact, it might even be worse next year. So, always be moving forward, always do something. It's not about creating gimmicks like, man, I'm going to plant a persimmon tree, which doesn't survive in Michigan anyway, or, a pear tree or an apple tree, or, I'm going to put more scrapes out, or I want to put out mineral licks and try fix the problem that way. Really it comes down to this. Let's say that somebody was building a huge apartment complex or a big hotel, and they put the frame up, right? They put the shell up, and then they run out of money. And, nobody's going to live there, right? There's no rooms. You got the base there, you got the frame, but you don't have the individual rooms, you don't have the hallways or anything like that. So nobody's going to want to live there. Well, it's the same thing in these big mature deer woods. You got a huge mature deer woods with a lot of shade, a lot of beautiful trees, but it's not a place a deer wants to live. So, by taking out the canopy and letting the sunlight in to create that regrowth, that's when all the rooms are completed. You got the hallways that you can create, right? Where you want deer to go from bedding to food, and put them right past your stand. You put the hallways in where you want it. And then you can even spice that up by planting a clover chicory blend on those deer trails, those travel corridors. And that's when your deer hunting becomes a lot more predictable and a lot more repeatable patterns that you can count on. And you'll be amazed at how soon you'll be passing some of those small bucks that a lot of guys are just shooting because they just want to say they were able to get their buck, right? Anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you to another spot where they did some logging about 6 years ago. Man, you wouldn't believe how thick it is over there. And it'll kind of give you an idea of what you can expect after 6 years of cutting. So here I drove about a mile down the road, and I'm at a spot where they had done some clear cutting here about 6 years ago. And you can see how different this looks, obviously. I mean, look at this beautiful white oak, This thing is really allowed to take off now. And we got another, white oak right here. But if you look around, here we got another beautiful white oak right there. We got a pine tree, or no, that's a spruce. We got another spruce. We got, look at this goldenrod, right? I mean, you would never see this. This would never grow in that woods that I was in where we got that high canopy. And we got so many species of browse and forbs and just little trees growing, bushes, that, I mean, look at the cover that this place is offering all these deer. I mean, there's hundreds of places where these deer can come in and hide and get away from these hunters. And I mean, the size of some of this goldenrod is unbelievable. We got some ragweed in here, and that's all deer food. You know, it's all deer food that you don't have to plant. You know, you look at the ground and we got all kinds of, you know, weeds, broadleaves growing. There's some ragweed, all kinds of other little broadleaves. And, you know, we got some blackberry. You know, it's highly preferred browse. Yes, we got some autumn olive in here. We probably got some honeysuckle in here, which, you know, they're all invasives, right? But hey, if you're looking for deer cover, you don't have to be a purist to have a great deer hunting property, you know, an environmentalist purist. I got a lot of autumn olive on a lot of properties that just produce big bucks every year, right? Because it's just such awesome deer habitat. But, you know, there are ways to deal with that stuff as well. So, you know, don't worry about that stuff. Don't let that stop you from cutting your woods because you're afraid you're going to have a bunch of invasives come back, right? I mean, look at this cover. Oh my word, there is just so much food out here. The leaves are down now, obviously, but you can see right here, look at this buck rub. Came in here and just shredded that spruce right there. So, man, what a great place to hunt. You know, we got hunters on this public land all in that big open timber, right? And there's probably nobody in here because, you know, yeah, you can't see very far. And that's one of the things that I hear from landowners is that, well, man, when it gets real thick like this, I'm not going to be able to see the deer. Well, again, like I said before, that's why we want to create those food plots. That's why we want to create those connecting trails and food plot corridors that are going to go from bedding to food, and then you can hunt not only along the food plot, but you can hunt along those food plot corridors as well for that repeatable and predictable deer movement. So I talk a lot about woody browse. We got to have woody browse because, you know, that's what deer eat most of the time. That's 60% of their diet. Even when all the crop fields are full of corn and soybeans and alfalfa, woody browse is still 60% of a deer's diet because they absolutely have to have it. And you can see right here, you know, deer have been nibbling on the ends of these oak branches. And on the trail side, you can see that it's, on the trail side right here, you can see it's browse. And then you get off the trail where it's not on the trail side, they're allowing that tree to grow a little bit more. So as we walk through here, you know, we got more woody browse going on, and you can see the diameter of this stuff. And deer will absolutely eat twigs and branches that are this diameter, without a doubt. Here's a little tree here. Now you can see the diameter of this tree, and it's only, what, a foot tall? Because they're not allowing it to grow. The reason why, it's right on the deer trail. So every time a deer walks by it, he's going to want to nip this thing. And they keep nipping all these branches off. That's woody browse. That right there is 60% of their diet. And that type of stuff is never going to grow in a woods that's got a high canopy, right? Where it's never been logged. So, I mean, look at all the blue sky we have up here. This is why all this stuff is growing. Free food, free cover. And actually, you were able to put a check in your pocket to make this happen. And you didn't even have to start a chainsaw. So, you know, it's a win-win-win situation. And then you're going to have unbelievable hunting, because where are the deer going to go to when the gun season starts? The lead's flying, and everybody's out there with their brothers and brothers-in-law and kids and grandpas, and you know, you get these 40-acre properties with 5 guys on it. The deer ain't going to be on that property. The deer are going to be here, right? So if your neighbor has done this and you haven't, man, I really feel sorry for you, because you know, your deer sightings are not going to be what you hope they are. So if you can be that guy in your neighborhood that has done this, you're going to be the one with all the deer. And your neighbors will be coming to you asking, man, this deer season's been horrible. You been seeing any deer? And you can just sit back and smile, you know. Now, there's one thing I really didn't talk about much yet, and that is the fact that a lot of guys are really afraid that the loggers are going to ruin their property. They're going to leave a lot of junk on the ground, and they're just going to leave a complete mess. They're going to leave ruts in the ground. They're not going to fix them. And then, you know, the landowner's going to have to figure out how to fix that problem. So yes, I have seen that, but you know, a lot of that can be diminished just by talking to these loggers, you know, your forester, your loggers and saying, hey, you know, this is not going to happen. I don't want a mess. And I guess the other thing that you really should communicate to the forester is that you want to tell him that when the loggers come to start cutting trees, that you want them to leave your tops in piles. Consolidated piles is really what you want, because at that point, if they can consolidate those treetops into piles, they're not going to leave those treetops strewn out over the whole forest floor, right? So you're going to have a much cleaner floor between the treetop piles, and that way you can get a lot more regrowth faster. And another thing those treetop piles do is if they're head high, you can actually take some of your medium-sized trees after the loggers are gone. You could take some of your smaller trees and you can hinge cut them and drop them right on top of those big brush piles. And those brush piles will act as a shock absorber to keep those trees alive after you hinge them. That way the head doesn't hit the ground at 100 miles an hour and snap right off the stump. So, there's a lot of benefit to making sure that these loggers, they put your treetops and put them in consolidated piles. Look at all this regrowth. The stem density is unbelievable through here. There is no way a deer can eat all this food. And he's got more places to lay. If we had the time to walk through here, I bet you we could find several dozen beds in here. It's just unbelievable the amount of cover and food that's in this place. So just kind of walking through this mess here and just kind of seeing what this all looks like. And I just came across a bed right here. This looks like a lone bed. It's a little high spot and pretty much the ground seems to want to go down in almost every direction. So, it's just textbook where these deer, no matter where you are in the country, they want to bed up on a higher ground, even if it's only a foot or two. But yeah, there's another example right there. What a great little spot. Perimeter cover. He's almost like in a little bedroom, the size of a small garage, right? He can hear anything coming. So I'm going to get out of here. It's getting toward the end of the day where guys are going to start showing up in the woods, and I don't want to mess up anybody's hunt here, so I'm going to get out of here. But hopefully this video has helped some of you guys that are involved with a hunt club, or you have several family members who are hesitant on cutting the woods and not sure what to do, how to do it, if it's the right thing to do, what the process is. Hopefully this video has, addressed some of those situations. If you want to see more before and after videos, I'm going to have several of those coming up here in the next few months or so. If you want to see those, hit subscribe, but I'd also recommend, subscribe to my buddy Jake's channel. I'm going to put a link down below so you can access his channel as well. He's got some great information. Jake's been doing this probably longer than anybody else. So in the meantime, hope you guys have a successful season the rest of the year. And I don't know about you, but I cannot wait to fire up my chainsaw. I'm getting an itchy trigger finger here, and I just want to start dropping some trees and helping landowners realize the type of hunting property that they've always wanted. So we will see you on the next video.